press the record button. Does anyone have any questions with respect to any of the content or assessments about the unit first before we actually make a start? Any burning questions that you might need answered? A good opportunity to ask them now.
Yeah, just Gavin here. If I could have 2 minutes after the tutorial to have a discussion, if possible.
No problems at all, Gavin. Just hang
Thank you.
back and ask a
No worries.
if you need to.
Thank you.
All right, well, I might make a start then. I'll just quickly whiz through the role and we can start. Listen, my internet connection has been really unstable this afternoon, but it tends to lock me out for just a second or two and then I'm back in again. So if you see that happen, don't think that I'm off having dinner. I haven't forgotten about you all. I will just get back in again as soon as I can. All right, Katrina, Nancy, Kayla, John, Hannah, Alex, Charlotte, Gavin, Nina, Shaykh.
Yep, present.
Thank you, Shaykh. Raman, Christopher, Cassandra, Adriana.
Yep.
Thank you, Adriana. Josephine.
Yep.
Madeline.
Yep.
Thank you, Madeline. And Kiralee. Okay, I haven't missed anybody. Excellent.
Sorry, was there another Charlotte or was it just me?
No, just you, Charlotte.
Because I'm not doing the presentation today. I did it last week.
Oh, let me have a look here.
Sorry, he just mentioned my name at the beginning. I was like, I haven't prepared anything.
Oh, hang on. Let me just... So, Raman, are you on your own?
I am.
You are. Okay. I beg your pardon then, Charlotte. It might have actually just been an error on views and I didn't pick up on it when I said...
No problem. That's right.
Sorry, Liz, you've also missed me.
Sure, Therese. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So, Raman, whenever you're ready, feel free to share your screen and you can get started. And again, you're dressed very well for the presentation today.
Thank you. I do apologise if the screen does freeze. Internet is not that great. I'll just get this started as soon as possible from the beginning. Okay. Can you guys hear me properly?
Yep.
You guys hear me? Okay. So my presentation for today will be basically on the article that we have for removing life support. So this article, I'll just go through in a bit with yourself. So that's basically Brian Liggett on the left-hand side. Just this is not part of the presentation, but on the left-hand side, that is our victim's brother, and on the right-hand side, that's the mother. Just go into the case background itself, just for those of you who don't know what this article is about. So in March 2016, Mark Liggett was involved in a car crash with a street sweeper, which resulted in him suffering with head injuries at Elizabeth in Adelaide's North. Joanne Dunn, so his mother, didn't raise him, is found to remove his feeding tube after the statutory 6 months period elapses for treating patients in a vegetative state. So Brian Liggett, his brother, so this is where the battle is. So his brother has refused to remove life support and said that they were given away to their paternal grandparents for care. So that basically these two boys, they weren't raised by their mum, they were raised by their grandparents. So in 2012, so this is 6 years after Mark had been placed in a vegetative state, it was agreed that his life support will be removed. We'll move on to the first question that I have here. So I do apologize, guys, if there is bad connection here. So considering that the patient, Mark Lippage, so the main person, is not in a state to make decisions for himself, should treatment be provided to prolong his life in case he does wake up from coma? What do you guys think? Anyone want to take a shot? Don't worry, no one's wrong. Take a guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, so what actually happened was, as I've mentioned earlier, what happened was he was so after 6 years, it was decided that his life support would be removed. So both mum and son agreed to remove his life support. This is after basically they went through a battle in court to decide whether they were going to remove life support or not. And this is basically a little bit of information from the article which I picked up. So this is 2012 as well. So Joanne Dunn will today make the most heartbreaking decision a mother can face. She will meet with doctors to ask them to stop feeding her son, Mark Leachip, to let him die. Now that's something very deep. So Mr. Leachip, 37, has been in a vegetative state since March 2006 after suffering head injuries in a car crash at Elizabeth in Adelaide's north. Now, moving on to the second question that I have here, where patient autonomy cannot be practiced, for example, in Mark Leachip's situation, where his mental abilities are weakened and damaged, who should make decisions for the patient, considering that Mark's mum wanted to remove life support and his brother opposed her? What do you guys think?
Shaykh here.
Yeah.
Ramin, I've got a question for you. Why was the mum so adamant on ending the son's life?
Okay, so from the information that I picked up on was basically she didn't want her son to go through this long. So the doctors basically came back saying that, you know, he did not have a chance of coming back from coma. So his mum's didn't. So this is one of the questions as well towards. This is something towards the end of the presentation as well, where we go through the intentions the mother may have had. Now, at this stage, the mum's intention was to basically stop him from going through all that suffering, and basically, you know, put him to peace. So that's basically what that was the mother's intention. It's basically put him in peace and get him out of suffering. Does that sort of answer the question, Shaykh?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Anyone else?
I mean, Gavin, you were very adamant when you actually said absolutely, but I mean...
Yeah, you should, but then now thinking about it, I think there need to be a little bit more context provided, which he has now stated.
I mean, I'm not challenging the position. I was sort of more interested to know what it was you were basing that position on, like what was going through your mind at the time.
Well, I sometimes think that, you know, with all due respect to clinicians and practitioners, sometimes there is that small percentage or chance that someone may wake from a coma.
And we hear medics get it wrong, right? You know how many...
Yes, exactly. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with getting it wrong. Sometimes it's a blessing. But yeah, I do think that you should. Yeah, if it was after 6 years, then it's pretty. I guess there's a strong case to support the mother's desire, but at the same time, there's always that small chance.
Okay. So who can make decisions for patients who can't consent to treatment?
So
Would you guys have...
next of kin?
Yeah. Anyone else want to take a Therese? Good answer.
Legal guardian.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Their spouse or something, so their husband or...
Yeah. Anyone else want to take a go? That's okay. So these are the, this is what I picked up from the research. So mandatory. So this is someone, so lets you name several people to act for you. You have a tutor, so that could be friends or family. You have a private curator. So this is a legal representative named by the court to represent the person who has become incapacitated. So that could be family or friends. And person given custody of the incapable patient by the public curator. Okay, moving on to the next question. So the next question is, can removing life support from an individual who cannot make an informed decision be classed as euthanasia?
I'm Gavin. I'm going to go out on a limb here. Do correct me if I'm wrong, Liz. I was just reading before, under Belgium law, that it is supported.
It is supported. Okay. So this is great answer once again, Gavin. This is what I picked up from one of the articles which I was going through. So from article Ethical Criteria for Removing Life Support, 2012, basically says that removing life support from persons in a persistent vegetative state is not euthanasia because it neither induces a new cause of death, nor does it imply the intention of killing the patient. So that's what do you guys think of? What do you guys think of that?
Just a question there, really quickly.
Yeah.
Regarding this week's topic, like one of the
Yeah.
examples was passive euthanasia, which is like with the hospices and stuff.
Yeah.
Where they don't they kind of speed up death and the inevitable. So how is this different?
Okay, so from research itself, this is basically going through the article itself, Ethical Criteria for Removing Life Support. Basically, the reason why they stated this was it wouldn't leave a burden on. So I'm not too sure. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Liz. This is what I picked up from an article that if treatment. So let's say, for example, if doctors were, going ahead with the treatment itself, and they continue, and there was a sign that they were proceeding with the treatments, that'd be they'll fall under the agent of death. That's what I picked up. So agent of death. So that's.
I guess if you go back to the different definitions of euthanasia can be expressed in a number of different forms, from voluntary, involuntary, non-voluntary euthanasia, and also active and passive euthanasia. So there would be an argument that would actually say that removing life support is non-voluntary euthanasia because the person hasn't consented, but neither have they actually said that they don't consent. They just can't give consent. So that's juxtaposed with involuntary euthanasia, which actually says that the person doesn't consent but they're euthanized anyway. An example of that would actually be capital punishment, for example, where people are killed against their consent. So it's more akin to murder or manslaughter. So in a position where they can't give consent, it would be considered non-voluntary euthanasia. And the means, whether it's active or passive, depends on how it eventuates. The issue with removing life support is that it's differentiated at law. Why? Because the cause of death is considered to be the underlying pathology. It's not actually considered to be removing the aid to sustain life. That happened post the injury or the disability or the physiological condition. And it's the physiological condition, the underlying physiological condition that's stipulated on the death certificate as being the cause of death. So it's not considered in the same framework as the traditional euthanasia because it's intervention by humans, which is then withdrawn, but the cause of death was that underlying health condition. Does that make sense? So say again for me what your specific question was there, Josie.
Oh, I was just curious as to how removing life support was different to passive euthanasia.
Okay, well, what do you guys actually think now that I've given you that definition again? Do you see any distinction? Really not. It's one and the same. Yeah. So removing life support would be considered to be passive euthanasia. That would be my I mean, you get different deviations from there. I think the Victorian, and I don't know whether you're euthanasia bent than a removing life support bent. But if you look at the Victorian legislation, which has recently been passed in that state, one of the conditions for the euthanasia is that the drug or is administered by the person themselves. So it's not actually administered by the health professional. The person themselves administers it to themselves. What do you think at law the intention is behind that? If you consider some of the elements of what we've talked about thus far, what do you think the purpose is of actually scripting it that way?
So it can be clear that they actually do consent to euthanasia. So I think if they were to do it themselves, then it would be clear that that's what they would want to do, I think.
Yes, that it's completely voluntary.
Essential. Yeah. Yeah.
Themselves is taking that final action, and it's completely voluntary. So it raises some interesting questions in terms of this nexus between removing life support and euthanasia and what sort of falls into one or the other category. But Raman, I think we'll let you go back into what you're actually wanting to cover.
No, that's okay. Thank you once again for that, Liz. Now, I've just got a little video which I picked up on while I was researching as well. This is all right if I just play this video?
Sure.
Plus, thank you. Okay. Hopefully it shouldn't take too long.
Raman, I'm having a bit of trouble hearing the audio with that.
Sorry.
Just having a bit of trouble with the audio.
Oh, sorry. I do apologise. Is it very bad, Liz?
I can't hear it. I'm just nod your head if you can hear it and shake your head if you can't. Can anyone hear it? No.
You guys can't hear it? Oh. So sorry.
Put up the volume and see how you go.
Okay. I hope this works. Can you guys hear now? No.
Maybe you can talk us through it.
Sorry. Can you hear me now, Liz?
Sorry, I'll just get back on. Yeah.
Can you hear me, Liz?
I can hear you.
Okay.
The video was a bit difficult to hear. Did you want to give it another shot?
Yeah, I'll try one more time and see if it works. Any luck there? No luck at all? Okay, because this is part of the presentation as well. Now, this video basically goes through, it's a Dr. Oz video goes through about difficulty of basically ending someone else's life and, you know, the impact it could have on both the family members and not only them, but the doctors as well. So these guys, they're basically professional doctors. They basically go through the experiences they've had with ending life support. I guess they've had experiences with previous experiences with basically ending life for some of their patients, and they basically go through, how difficult it is for them, not only them, but for the family itself, whether to keep life support for these patients or not. And that's what it was basically surrounded. It was basically surrounded around ending life support for some patients. And I was going to ask, there was some key elements in this video, but unfortunately I cannot play this video. But wish I could play the video somehow. You guys not picking up any audio at all on your end?
No.
Nothing at all. Okay, that's okay. Liz, is it okay if I move on to the next question that I have here? Sure. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Okay. So the next question that I have here is, what would be the intention of the person removing life support? So, for example, in our client's case, Joanne Dunn, things to consider that her son was not raised by her, and Joanne was never present in any of the physio sessions. And you guys, anyone want to take a go? No? Anyone?
Didn't you, hey Raman, didn't you talk before about it being about her removing her son's suffering? Like she... Yeah. And so from this case, from when I was doing the research itself, from the ethical criteria for removing life support, so when people remove life support from a loved one, because it is ineffective or a serious burden, they often express relief or even joy. Thus we hear, mom has died, but she is better off. Dad, death was a blessing. But what people are expressing through these words is relief and joy that the burden has been removed. So not joy and relief that mom or dad is dead, if the ineffective or burdensome therapy could be removed without the ensuing death of mum and dad, then Loving Children would remove the therapy in a manner which would prolong life. So in this article that we were going through itself, I guess the mum basically, there was a dispute where the mum wanted to remove her son's life support because she basically wanted to basically move him from suffering, and his brother wanted to continue the life support which he had and keep him in a vegetative state, so that way, he can continue to see if he'd be removed from coma or not. And that was basically the case there. Any questions in regards to that?
I mean, what do you think of this idea of actually suffering by removing a feeding tube? And essentially what you're actually saying there is the person's getting nutritional food, so they're starving.
Yeah.
I mean, is that an end to suffering? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Gavin here. I think he was already in suffering, and I think by removing the life support is coming to it's, I guess, a point in time to not, end the suffering, but to, not prolong the inevitable. Mm-hmm. That's how I would interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess the question I have is I'm all for removing the life support when it's no longer necessary and it's just prolonging the inevitable. Mm. But why was the mother suddenly present at the death? That's kind of the only thing that doesn't make sense to me. She didn't raise them and she never attended the physio, and then suddenly she comes along thinking from her intentions. I get her intention might be to not prolong, but I kind of feel like there's another underlying intention there. I'm not quite sure why she'd suddenly become present at this final stage of the life. So that was, I guess, the only kind of catch I found in the whole article.
And I guess given the fact that she didn't attend the treatment session, so you're left in a bit of a quandary thinking, well, you're not actively involved in sort of what's going on, even in hospital, but you're wanting to impact on the decision. So what really is motivating you? It does raise some alarm bells, doesn't it?
Mm.
I mean, but who knows? I mean, it might be that she didn't and couldn't attend the physio sessions because it was too traumatic for her, or she didn't have the resilience to be able to do that. But, again, it just raises some questions which might be able to be justifiably answered with a reasonable response. The issue is we don't know.
Thank you. Should I move on to the...
Yes, please.
Oh, sure. So move on to the next question here. So the question is, if we don't use artificial means to support life, are we denying them the chance to live longer or recover fully? So just before any of you go through, so just a definition which I looked up. So a definition of artificial life support is basically artificial maintenance of life, continuance of life through medical equipment, extension of life by technological means, sustenance of life by artificial means generally being kept alive, fostering of life, life retention, preservation of life, and prolongation of existence. Does anyone want to take a go at that question?
Wouldn't using artificial life just to support their life, wouldn't that increase their life? Isn't that sort of what they're trying to do? I don't fully understand the question. Sorry.
Okay, so basically the question's asking, so artificial life itself, are we basically helping our patients, let's say for example, the article that I'm kind of looking into, are we helping them prolong their life, or are we just to basically help them recover, or if we basically, are we denying them?
Yeah, right. Well, I definitely think that obviously artificial life can prolong their life. And I think it's quite situational as to whether they would recover or not. As Gavin said before, there is the chance that they might fully recover, but it seems like a high chance that they definitely won't.
On the back end of that, sorry to cut in,
right.
I love technology, so I also think while it's situational, I think it's also subjective to an individual. Whilst we may provide artificial support to extend their life, who's to say 6 months down the track they believe that it's now causing more harm than good.
Okay. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Charlotte. So this is what I've basically from research itself. So from the article Ethics in Life Sending 2004, about 30 years ago, it was stated that it is better to withhold the treatment than to overdraw it. Basically means that if a ventilator, dialysis or feeding tube was stopped and the patient dies from lack of life support, you were the agent of death. But slowly, through time, with the help of philosophers, theologians, attorneys, and jurists, the medical profession came to accept that there is no moral or legal difference between withholding and withdrawing a treatment. In fact, it may be ethically better to withdraw life-sustaining treatment than it is to withhold it. And that's from the research itself. Now, just more over to the legal side of things. Does anyone know who governs the withdrawal of life support in Australia currently?
What do you mean by governs? Do you mean what institute oversees or who makes the decision?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone want to take a go? No. That's okay. Okay, so in Australia at present, withdrawal of life support is governed partly by the common law. In cases of any unconscious patient whose life is in danger and whose wishes are unknown, and where no legally authorised representative is available, under the doctrine of medical necessity, consent to life-saving procedures is implied either under common law. So the most important obligation for a doctor is to save lives. But when it is a practitioner lawfully allowed to discontinue life support for patients?
So you're saying under the doctrine of necessity, the life-saving mechanisms are put in place, but who then has the obligation or who has the authority to authorise withdrawal of that life-saving technology? What do you think?
Sorry, Gavin. It would, the most important obligation to save life is a practitioner lawfully allowed to discontinue life support. Purely circumstantial again. Evidently, they can't lawfully discontinue life support unless they do have the consent. It really comes down to the circumstances. So there's no, I guess, simple, straight, clear answer.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you. So it is where a cessation of nourishment and hydration is an omission and not an act. So this is because once it has been taken out of the positive act category, removing life support will not be seen as a criminal conduct unless it is shown that a doctor was continuing treatment.
Now, when there's a dispute between what the family wants and what the health professionals are recommending, what happens then? And this is not just to Raman, this is to anyone who might be researching this topic for your major essay or who has a general interest in reading. What do you think, even based on research, what do you think when there's a dispute between family and the health professionals? Who ultimately has a say? Anyone have any idea?
Well, Gavin, I'll have a shot at it. I think at the end of the day, it's a very grey area. It does come down to the family, but at the same time, it needs to fall under the duty of care of the practitioners as well.
Mm-hmm. What do others think? And if so, if what Gavin is saying is assumed to be true, do you agree with it? Do you think it should be the family in collaboration with the doctors and the health professionals? Anyone have any ideas?
Alex, I don't know if this is grounded in law, but I would think that where the patient doesn't have where they're not conscious, so they can't make their own decisions, I would think that maybe the health professionals, so paramedics sometimes as well, but the health professionals would be in a better position to decide on what they needed in a healthcare capacity.
Sorry, and actually in the UK model, that's very much the way it rolls out. So in the UK, it's the health professionals who make that decision, it's not family. In Australia, we've adopted a bit more of a collaborative approach, and it's very much the health professionals in consultation with and collaborating with family about what the recommendation is in terms of removing life support. And when there's an irreversible or irreconcilable treatment plan, and there's a dispute that can't be negotiated between health professionals and the family, and it's litigated, so it does go to courts. Courts will tend to actually err on the side of the decision of the health professionals. They tend to uphold what the experts in that particular situation are actually recommending based on clinical health signs, really. That's what it comes down to. Yeah, interesting. Okay, thank you, Raman.
Thank you. That's all I have for today as well. Thank you, Liz.
Oh, okay. I didn't mean to sort of jump in there and bring it to a conclusion. All right, no, that's very interesting. Thank you. Does anyone have any final thoughts about this particular topic or have any personal experiences? I mean, I think once again, what you think and what you reason through at a conceptual level can be very different than when you're going through the situation based on, you know, experiential knowledge and being in the situation. I mean, which particular theories do you think would lend themselves nicely to an analysis of removal life support? We touched on it particularly when we were discussing the mother, but what ethical theories might help you reason your way through decision making with respect to removing life support? Josie, you raised an interesting point with respect to the mother. Did you know what ethical theory would actually...
Sorry, I was just taking notes.
Okay, do you remember which one it might be? Which ethical theory that goes to the motivation? Because that's what you were questioning with the mother's actions, weren't you?
I feel like it's act consequentialism, or...
Well, you're close, yeah. It's not really one of the deontological frameworks. It's more... well, let me ask. Does anyone have a stab at it?
Yeah.
Yes,
I think it's virtue.
Virtue, yeah, it's virtue theory. So virtue theory looks at the intentions of the parties. So the mother's expressed intention is saying she wants to actually end the suffering, she wants to end the pain, which is virtuous by intent. She's meaning good. So even though the consequence is clearly going to be death, and that is less justifiable from an ethical analysis, you know, death can't be reasoned as being a good thing, that her intention is to end suffering. So virtue theory looks at the motives of the person. The other thing, and we see this again in the Victorian legislation which has recently passed, where one of the witnesses to the consent for the euthanasia in Victoria cannot be a beneficiary of the will that the person leaves, okay? And that's again to remove any untoward intention or any self-serving intentions rather in terms of managing that process. So it is very much looking at what the person wants without any sort of interplay, or it's hoped to, without any interplay of other motives jeopardising that person's, or the integrity of that process rather. Are there any other theories that you think would be helpful in analysis of this topic?
Well, I guess consequentialism is something that you can consider when discussing removing life support, because I guess from a social point of view, it's costing taxpayer dollars to keep these people on life support for a prolonged period of time, especially if they're not going to recover. So I guess there's another way of looking at it, is that, you know, should there be a time limit, we should be, you know, saying that this is the time point, you have to give up at this point, so that we're not wasting or, you know, using these resources unnecessarily.
Yeah, and when we're actually talking about limited resources and the allocation and how to use those resources in a prudent way, I mean, 6 years is an awfully long time to get to the same conclusion that you could have gotten to in 6 months, and think about what that extra 5.5 years could have done in terms of the health dollar and where that could have been invested and how much benefit might have actually been raised with that. So based on this principle of justice and looking at what's equitable and what's fair and the allocation of resources, there would certainly be an argument there. And the reality is, I mean, with the medical advancement and the medical technology, we are in a position now where we can prolong life a lot more than we ever could in the past. So this whole idea of survival of the fittest and the natural attrition and sort of ending and people being born and people leaving and that kind of thing, well, to what end? You know, at what point do we as a society say, based on this principle of utility, the greatest good for the greatest number of people, even though we can, we shouldn't? Now, I'm not adopting a position. I'm just raising some questions for you here to think about in terms of the issues. I mean, what do you think, just in terms of this idea of resource allocation? Do you think that's justifiable, or do you think really health is a basic human right, and if we have the means to preserve life, we should be doing that at all costs? What do you think?
Yeah, I think in regards to trying to, I guess, use the dollar in the best way that you can, is quite sort of an impossible task to do, because, for example, this person who's been in a coma for 6 years, he might have paid millions of dollars in tax because he might be a billionaire or something. So I guess he has the right to use that money that he's given to the government and to Australia and the tax. So I guess you can never really know whether that person's deserving of that dollar or they're not, whether he's paid no tax at all. So I think there's no way of determining where that dollar should go, that it should just be, yeah, it's a basic human right. He's sick. We'll do what we can to get him better, I guess. So I think it's sort of an impossible task to be able to do that.
What about this legal distinction between euthanasia and removing life support? Do you think it's a furphy? You know, it's not. It's an artificial distinction. Or do you think there's legitimacy in terms of that legal distinction in the way that we see one as being quite different from the other?
I'm not too sure.
That's okay, Charlotte. It wasn't just directed to you. It was open to the group. Or is that too heavy for 7:10 on a Tuesday just after Christmas and New Year? What have we gotten ourselves into here? Madeline, what do you think? Do you see euthanasia and removing life support as basically the same thing?
I think with euthanasia, I think individuals, if they have not the right state of mind, but if they're able to consent to euthanasia, I don't think that it's the same as removing life support, because people that are in the predicament of on life support, then it's not the same, because they cannot consent to that. So like you spoke about before, it's passive euthanasia, because they're not consenting. So they're not voluntary wanting to end their life, people on life support, I mean. But whereas people who actually choose to end their life in terms of euthanasia, I think it's a bit different, but in the same way it is similar, but I wouldn't class them as directly the same, if that makes sense.
So they have similar features, but they're not the same in terms of practice implications. Yeah, and that certainly, as I mentioned earlier, would be the way the law would actually draw that distinction.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing just to mention, I mean, do you think that we are moving in a direction that euthanasia will actually be legal in Australia, and there's no right or wrong answer to this? It's just crystal balling. Do you think that that's the way it's going? I mean, in New South Wales, it was voted down by 1 vote. Now that's awfully close.
I think euthanasia is definitely a popular. I think a lot of people do agree with it, that euthanasia should become illegal, because it's, exactly what we're learning, the rights of an individual. If they have the right, if they're going through have a horrible disease and, there's no end into that, then they should be given the right, to end their life when it's their choice and when they would like to. But I think there's a lot of people, especially religious people, people who have religious mindsets will oppose it. But I think it will become legal throughout Australia, but I don't know when. But I think it's quite a popular. Like personally, I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's quite. I couldn't imagine what people go through in that instance, but I do understand how people view it and if they agree with it.
And I guess if you think about this principle of autonomy is actually underpinning even the removing life support idea in the absence of an advance directive. So a directive that's actually written in advance by the person that clearly articulates their expressed wishes if they were ever in that situation as to what they want. Under the Guardianship Act, there is this concept of the responsible person. So a substituted decision maker who, having knowledge of the person and their values and how they see the world, and perhaps some informal discussions that haven't been formalised, what they would want in those circumstances, and making a decision in that person's best interests. Again, how you safeguard against, some self-serving agendas or some self-interest playing in there becomes quite problematic. And how you stop vulnerable people from being taken advantage of becomes quite problematic. And so you can have all the regulations in the world about self-administering, but how free really is this choice if people are feeling coerced, even at a subconscious level, in terms of not being a burden on their family or not, wasting their family's time or whatever it might actually be. It gets quite problematic. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your contributions today. Thank you, Raman. If you didn't have any questions, then certainly I can let you go. If there are particular questions that you might have with respect to any of your assessments or logistics, please just hang back because we do have some time to go through that in the remainder of the time today. Otherwise, I shall see you next week. Please don't forget that your online contributions continue this week and need to be posted by 5 p.m. on Friday so that I can have a look at those and they can count to your weekly participation marks. And also don't forget that your online quizzes recommence this week again, the time frame being 5 p.m. Friday before they close. Okay. So if I have a question, I'll bid you adieu. Otherwise, I might see some of you for a little bit longer. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.
And one by one they drop off. Okay. All right. So, Gavin, I think you had a question first up. Did you want to go through that now, or was it of a personal nature?
A bit personal, yeah. Okay. So I'll let the other guys go.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Okay. Thanks, Alex.
Yes.
Raman, any feedback about your presentation specifically? Or was it
it was presentation as well. Sorry, I didn't prepare. As you could see, I did not prepare properly for this presentation. It was more like last minute. Work. And I do apologise, Liz.
Hang on. I might just need to stop the recording. Hang on.